Okay, I will call the Southbury Board of Selectmen special meeting to order Thursday, September 22nd, 2022 at 7 p.m. This meeting is held at Pumperog High School Auditorium, 234 Judd Road. If we could please shut off all electronic audible devices, phones and beepers. And if we can have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First, I'd like to say to everybody, welcome to Region 15 Pumperog High School. If you've not been here, it's a wonderful facility. And I want to thank the region for allowing us to have this meeting here. We do appreciate that. Next up is going to be the public comments. The public comments are limited to 2 minutes. If you'd like to make a public comment, it would be nice if you could state your name and where you live and make a public comment that is limited to 2 minutes. And at the end, I will ask for public comments calls 3 times, and then we'll end the public comment. So if there's any public comment, please come forward.
So you want people to line up or just come up? So good evening. My name is Jerry Leventhal. I'm the president of Heritage Village. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a fight, but we are not reluctant fighters. We are fighting for our right for safety and security for an elderly, vulnerable population of more than 5,000 residents. Previous inaction or actions by the first selectman has compromised pedestrian safety on Wheeler Road. And more recently, without due diligence, pushed and passed the town ordinance as costing the village at least $150,000. We note that there are 2 new police positions added to the budget, yet the decision was made unilaterally to take away the community resource officer, or as I like to know it as community policing. For the record, we are 100% pro-police. Unfortunately, the first selectman has made this an either-or proposition. Anyone familiar with budgets this size and management experience will tell you there were several other alternatives. Since he chose none, and we are asking you, the selectmen, to deny the request for a detective until the 5,000 plus residents can be reassured that it can be done without adversely affecting our safety and our sense of security. Our hope is to repair damage done between the town and the village. But this can only happen by giving us the respect we believe we deserve at this point in our lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Dorothy Peebles-Pelley. I'm the Condo 6 Heritage Village trustee. I have a question for the board. Is anyone on this board 55 or older? Heritage Village is an active, vibrant community of residents who are 55 and older. Please understand who we are. We are not an old folks' home. We are not an assisted living facility and not a nursing facility. We are a vibrant, active community within the town of Southbury. Residents of Heritage Village are residents of Southbury. We live here. We pay taxes. We shop. We eat in restaurants and attend town functions. We are a community within this larger than many area towns. We are bigger than towns in not just Connecticut, but other places. We live here. Residents are active people, working or retired, doctors, lawyers, nurses, teachers, college professors, business professionals, musicians, artists, and more. People who worked at every level of corporate life and worked in government, including local, state, national, international, such as NATO, who are and have been movers and shakers within the world, and we came here to live in Heritage Village in Southbury. People who are retired or working and making their living here are still here. I suggest that this Board of Selectmen never underestimate those of us who make up Heritage Village. We expect a level of service and government from our town that any other resident here would expect. We need specific services for the best relationship with other town entities. We need communication, specific police support, all the services that every resident of Southbury expects, even though we are a unique community
that's
within
2
the
minutes.
town of Southbury.
Thank you.
Residents of Southbury
Ma'am, that's
Village
2 minutes.
are
Please.
members of the town of Southbury. We live here.
Ma'am.
Never underestimate the residents. We are 5,000 plus, and we vote in Southbury. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment?
Hi, my name is Ron Altman. I live in Heritage Village. I moved here 3 years ago. I was really impressed with the fact that it's an active 55 and over community. It's not a nursing home. It's not an assisted living facility. It is an active 55 and over community. We are almost 5,000 people. We have 1,000 acres of land. We have 2,500 dwelling units. Can you think of a town that size that doesn't have a policeman? It is absolutely outrageous that we do not have a single police officer who is going to patrol our area. Thank you.
My name is Ox. I live at Heritage Village, have been doing it for 9 years. I disagree with most of the people here, and that's because with the percentage of population and taxes that we pay, there should be an officer 24/7 at Heritage Village.
Barbara Wheeler, 569 Poverty Road in Heritage Village. Citizen of Southbury and live in Heritage Village. And I have to say, I'm very sad. I have been attending Board of Selectmen meetings for years and talking about senior issues. And here I am again. And I thought one of the best things that happened for seniors was that the community resource officer. Now, I pulled what's on the website. It's a wonderful thing. It was a good thing, and you're taking it away from us. And so the main focus, first thing, the community resource officer was for all the seniors up by Heritage Village. That included Heritage Village, Heritage Crest, Heritage Circle, Pomperaug Woods, and and Grace Meadows. So it's not just us. We may be fighting for it, but we fought for the water too. And I'm going to leave. If you haven't seen what's on the website, you should look because it's important. Where can I leave this? Okay, good. Thank you.
Wow, there's a lot of people here. When I moved into Southbury, this would have represented half the population. So I've been here a while, on and off. But my name's
could you
Ed
give us your
Ed
name?
Perry. Ed Perry, I live in Heritage Village.
Sorry?
Ed Perry, I live in Heritage Village. It would have been great back in 1977 when I led my first, this is my second demonstration. My first was that the beautiful town hall was built, and my kids had to go to high school at Gainfield. And thank goodness the villagers at the time voted in a block also to help us get a new high school. And I contribute that to the fact that they also raised their kids and supported their high school. And just because they were in this particular position in our life didn't mean that they were going to ignore my children or our children at the time. So I'm asking, now that I'm on the other side of the coin, we're asking the residences of Southbury to help the village. And I don't see where having a resource officer is going to impact our budget that significantly. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Judy Bennett. I live in Heritage Village. Anybody can go to the Department of Justice website, do a search on registered sex offenders, and find within a 3-mile radius, which includes Heritage Village, that we have 12 within 3-mile radius. Some of those live in Heritage Village. The rate of recidivism for violent sexual offenders in Connecticut is 60 to 75%. I am a victim and survivor of domestic violence, and I know that if I had someone like our community resource officer was, who is close by, perhaps knowledgeable of who has an issue like I used to have, I think that we would feel a lot more comfortable knowing that we have these people in our neighborhoods. Also, I don't know what the percentage is of the population of Heritage Village. I know in my cluster there are 11 units. 6 of those are women who live alone. Please consider this subject as you consider giving us back our CRO. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Elaine Altman. I live at 326 Heritage. My husband and I are here just about 3 years. Now, we all just pledged allegiance to the flag. And part of the pledge said, justice for all. We would like some justice. We pay taxes. We don't have children in school. So we're not taking away from the tax base. We deserve services that we've worked hard to attain, and I would just like to encourage you to keep our community resource officer. And I'd like to recite a little poem that perhaps may help you think about where we are today. It goes, stop and stare as you pass me by. As you are now, so once was I. As I am now, soon you shall be. So please prepare to get older and follow me.
Good evening. My name is Bob Hawley. I've been a resident of the village for 10 years. My question is, do the other selectmen support the idea that Mr. Manville has of not fulfilling our wishes? I would love to know that answer. Thank you.
Good evening. Gail Hughes, 801 Heritage Village. On 9/1, I sent an individual email to each selectman, received one response. I would like to receive a response from each of you. This is a brief from the email that I sent. As a resident of Heritage Village, I am concerned with this proposal. The Heritage Village governance, leadership, management, and residents are not receptive to this proposed change and never indicated agreement with this proposal. Why would this position be changed in any way after it was determined years ago that this full-time presence was absolutely necessary? Read the job description, duties and responsibilities, and tell us what is no longer needed. We need the community resource officer for the same reasons that we have a school resource officer. We need someone to act as a liaison, to work closely with the HV Public Safety, to meet with management and executive officers to advise us of any incidents that may affect our safety and security, to update our residents on any issues or concerns that affect the village, to provide risk assessment and risk management. We need the community resource officer to act as a deterring force and provide patrol in a marked police vehicle. Our CRO was often our first responder. On the scene at emergency calls, and residents knew this officer because he was present in our community. Why are you removing the CRO? What are the current trends and demographics in Heritage Village? We are seeing more residents moving in with adult children. This is a current trend everywhere. With that being said, we have family disputes, aggression, substance use, and mental health concerns. Domestic abuse, IPV, skyrocketed in Connecticut over the last 3 years. Additionally, in Heritage Village, we have noted more impaired driving, speeding, and driving under the influence.
Ma'am, that's 2 minutes, thank you.
Thank
We need
you.
to get other people in.
We live in very
Please.
close proximity to each other. Where else in town do we see this configuration? More people, more potential for aggression and hostility. We need more security and protection. Take a service away from the
Ma'am,
most
it's a 2-minute
vulnerable
Ma'am, it's a
population,
2-minute limit, please. Can we have the next
a
speaker?
marginalized group.
Ma'am,
It
can we
was
have the next
determined
speaker,
years
please?
ago that this full-time community resource
Can we have the
officer
next speaker, please?
was absolutely necessary. Tell us what changed.
Thank you.
Tell us what
Next
changed.
speaker, please.
Thank you.
Next public comment.
Marsha Weinstein, Heritage Village. This town has a very rich history in fighting injustice. In 1937, the town stood up against the Nazis and said no. You've united this town again to say no. Nobody's done that since 1937. This is an important issue for the village. We will not accept injustice. We want justice, and we want equal service. That's what we're asking for.
My name is Dale Lynch. I live at 323 Kruger Circle in Heritage Village. I'm a new resident here. I just moved here in December, so I'm new to Southbury, I'm new to Heritage Village, and I'm new to this board. I know nothing about your politics. I don't know who's a Democrat, who's a Republican, but I do know one thing, that I am extremely concerned about the way decisions are being made. This is an example that scares me. To have a uniformed police officer for the past 8 to 9 years, maybe 10 years, that's a history we had. To have that position just obliterated with no discussion whatsoever with the members that had a relationship with that person. That is not democracy. That's not about the town that I want to be a part of. I looked at the website for the town of Southbury before I moved here, and I was so impressed with your description of the police department resources that were available to the community. And anybody that hasn't looked, I urge you to look, because it says it all. That is exactly what has been taken away from us. It's exactly the resource we need, and I think that we need to look at the way decisions are being made. This discussion should have happened before
before, not after, the decision was made. One of the points that was made very clear tonight was that we are a part of this town. First and foremost, we're a part of Southbury. We happen to live in a community called Heritage Village, which is certainly as big as many municipalities or towns in the state of Connecticut. We have a right to resources. We pay taxes. We expect the resources to be used. We expect our taxes to be used for our resources. Just last week, there was an article headlined in the paper about a Heritage Village resident arrested for larceny at TJ Maxx and heroin. We don't live in the world we lived in 10 years ago. We live in a world that's much more scary and much harder for senior citizens to navigate than ever before. We need your help. I'm asking that you make the honorable, responsible decision, whether you be Democrat or Republican, that you do the right thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Isabel Burke, Heritage Village. The model that you have posted on Southbury's website is exactly the model that the U.S. Department of Justice recommends as the #1 best method for policing in any community in the United States. The best. Community policing not only works, the DOJ puts it at the top of their website. So I honestly cannot imagine why you would think that we wouldn't miss top-of-the-line policing. Plus, as a business person, this is going to devalue my condo. This is going to deter people from moving into Heritage Village, quality people. Once news gets out that our town doesn't respect us enough to maintain the level of service recommended by the U.S. Department of Justice. I paid good money for my condo. I love where I live. I love the town of Southbury. I beg you, please do not devalue my real estate. Please do not make my condo less attractive to other people. We are the #11 senior community in the United States. Don't change that. We are proud. We are proud. And thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Fenn, and I am speaking as a Southbury resident and an employee of Heritage Village who has worked closely with both of the previous community resource officers. And even though I am not representing these organizations tonight, I also serve as the vice chair of the Senior Services Commission, and I am a board member of the Southbury Senior Alliance. It is important to note that the CRO did not only cover Heritage Village, which is what has been reported in the newspapers. The CRO covered the greater Heritage Village area, which includes the Village, the Watermark, Grace Meadows, and Pomperog Woods. They also served Heritage Crest and Heritage Circle, who are not affiliated with the Village and are not 55 and older communities. The sense of safety and security that the CRO provided to the residents within this community has been immeasurable. They did much more than just patrol the area and speak about scams. They de-escalated incidents of domestic and neighbor disputes. They attended condo meetings to update residents of areas of concern. They met weekly with our management and governance team to update them on any issues that were taking place in the village, and they were the first on the scene in an emergency. During a recent interview, First Selectman Manville stated that the 2-year period, starting in 2019, there were only 4% of calls to emergency services from Heritage Village. This number does not include the rest of the Heritage Village area, and it does not include the rest of the area, and it is a direct result of having the CRO in place, as they were there during those years. I would ask what the statistic would be if it was from a time when there was no CRO and it did include those other areas. Finally, I would like to remind you that there are approximately 5,000 voters in this community. And while you state that the Southbury cares about its senior population, the action of removing the community resource officer shows these 5,000 voters the exact opposite. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Zoe Milbank. I reside at 402B Heritage Village. I would like to quote from you from the Southbury Town website. The Southbury Police Department's Greater Heritage Village Community Resource Officer has a complex and diverse assignment. This officer is assigned to enhance and facilitate a positive and productive relationship between the Southbury Police Department, town services, and the citizens of the Greater Heritage Village area. Heritage Village, Heritage Crest, Heritage Circle, Pomperaug Woods, the Watermark, and Grace Meadows. The CRO is a full-time uniformed police officer position who is responsible for patrolling the Greater Heritage Village area, as well as interacting and assisting the senior citizen community. This officer works as a liaison for the senior citizen community, facilitating a positive relationship between the Southbury Police Department, Southbury Town Hall, Southbury Senior Center, and various state agencies. The main focus of this officer is to help prevent and reduce crimes against senior citizens. For example, scams, frauds, larcenies, and abuse. This officer also must contend and show compassion with aging issues such as driving, medical issues, and family notifications. The demographic this officer is assigned to serve and protect have very unique and diverse needs, unlike the general population of Southbury, unquote. Although you have stated that Southbury cares about its seniors, by removing the CRO position, you have proven this 5,000 Southbury citizens the exact opposite. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Forlastro, 772B Heritage Village, and I will put a question before the selectmen and the committee. I don't want the answer, but I want you to reflect on it, okay? When you go home at night, are you looking for safety and security in your homes? Possibly motion detector, sensor lights, door cams, security systems to make you feel comfortable when you go to bed at night. We want the same thing. This I will make short and sweet, that the reinstating of the officer that we are requesting, if you review in your later days, as many of us do here because you all appear much younger, okay, to reflect on your careers and say, what have I done in a positive manner in my career? When have I had the opportunity to do something for someone that's positive? You can be heroes to 5,000 people.
Thank you.
My name is Fran Tetro. I live at 971A, Heritage Village, for 7 years. We moved here for safety because we lived in an area that wasn't safe. Now I feel like we're going to tell the whole world, just come and have us, because we're not going to be protected like we thought we were when we bought our homes at Heritage Village. I would also like to reiterate my concern with how governments can pass any kind of a government. How can they pass this kind of judgment or this kind of decision without giving us any warning, any discussion? How does it come in like a hurricane and take over? It's not fair. It's not the right way. It's not the democratic way to do something. My next point is, you, sir, at the first meeting, you said, I can't get a police officer to come there. Nobody wants to come there. I personally, I don't know how you meant it, but I personally was insulted. They don't want to come here because we're a bunch of old people that don't matter anymore? Or maybe there's another reason. Could there be a financial reason that in some way they're losing out on maybe overtime or something like that? We need transparency. We need the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And we also need the respect that we deserve as seniors who have contributed to this state and this country. Please, please reconsider.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Suzanne Hoko, and I'm fairly new to Heritage Village. My husband and I moved in a year ago in July. We were welcomed. We have wonderful neighbors, and we have found it to be a wonderful community. But what saddens me is what's happening now. And I concur with everything that's been said here. But I think it's very sad that, for one, I feel that our rights have been cast aside or maybe just not considered or violated, because we should be a part of this. We are a big part of the community and also the most vulnerable part of this community. But we also serve the community, and I think we are a wonderful part of the community. But, as the woman who just spoke said, we are going to be even more vulnerable. I mean, look at what's happened to cities, towns in our nation that have, the police have left their jobs for many reasons. And as soon as that's out there, look at what's happened to towns, cities. Some people aren't even aware. But it's awful, and it will make us more vulnerable to something similar. How do we know? Again, look what's happened to our country in this past, I don't know, year and a half. And it's very sad, it's scary. But I do believe we have a very strong community here, and that we will stand up for what is right and stand up for our own safety on behalf of our community, ourselves, our children, our grandchildren. We care, and we want you to care, and for us to be respected as a part of this community and the strength that we have and what we can offer. And I don't believe that's been had, or that's happened. And I hope and pray that that will change, because you have a lot of resources here, wonderful resources. And I thank you, but also, one last thing is, I don't understand how the first selectman can also be the chief of police, because that, to me, is a conflict of interest. So, I thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Carrie Cleary, 341A. The only thing I have to say is, throughout all of this, the hardest part for me is you've lost my trust. And because of that, it's going to make us much more proactive moving forward.
You need to fix this.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Volan. I'm from Heritage Village. I'd like to talk about a very unpleasant subject, but just as it happens in schools, it happens in condominiums like this. It's bullying. And not all the people in Heritage Village are busy, outspoken people. There's a lot of lonely, solitary people who just live out their lives quietly, but you could do so in a peaceful place. But if a bully goes after such people, and the residents know there's no one as long as the bully doesn't use violence, he could use many other things like slander and just whatever the bullies are street smart and they know what to do but the equalizer is a policeman, because the most quiet person, the most solitary person, when they can't turn to their neighbors and they can't turn to the president, because the president is a volunteer, it's not his job to risk his life or risk his safety. So what the equalizer is the policeman. And it's my judgment that in the last 8 years that you had a policeman here, it prevented many, many instances of bullying, because the policemen are not afraid of a bully, and they have the ability to investigate and see if a bully did things in the past. So having a policeman prevents a lot of trouble which could go where people have no recourse, and people without the policeman to complain to and no one in Heritage Village to respond to them are just told to move. So it's a very excellent thing for the quiet, not the people who are coming here and social and outspoken, but the quiet people who don't have too many friends, who don't have influence. They're the ones that need a policeman. And I'm sure many bullies haven't moved into Heritage Village in the last 8 years because they know a policeman is there, and bullies are cowards.
Thank you.
Hello. I have a voice issue that I'm recovering from, and I sometimes don't speak because of it, but I'm moved to come up and speak. I'm 77. I can be found on the pickleball courts in the morning, working during the day, and dancing at night. Yes, I'm one of those active people. I feel like I'm in my 20s. However, when I come home late at night, I can feel very frightened about going from the garage to my front door. It's kind of scary. Yeah, I'm even afraid of the bears. So I certainly am afraid of people that might be out to do some harm. My thought was, I would like you to reflect on if your parents lived here, what would you do? Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I'm not good at public speaking either, you can tell. I'm Laura Field. I live in Heritage Village. And I have a personal experience I'd just like maybe to have you think about in terms of why this could be a very important position and be very helpful. In our unit, we had a person with early Alzheimer's. The person was probably about 55, 60, very good shape. He had been incredibly active his whole life. He had triggers, and sound was a trigger. My husband was out with our large dog, and our large dog barked. The person had a problem. He went and tried to hit my husband right in the face. And there's a police report out there because of that. But what we're looking for is maybe some intervention. My husband was able to block that. Former police officer, he's had training. But somebody else might not be that lucky. If you have an older person, maybe with ill health or something like that, that could have been horrible. So anyways, maybe just a little food for thought, why this is just so very important. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Selectman, at the last meeting we had, this business was tabled for further discussion. Only to my surprise, and I think all of us, it was changed and the total removal of the police officer from being a part of our village. I would just like to know why. And secondly, think of the area that we live in. We are probably the most quietest and most respectful to officers and to leaders. It is unbelievable that you, in your way of thinking, were not thinking about 5,000 people, but about whatever it is. Maliciousness, maybe, thinking that we spoke too much, too strongly against it. But it is a duty of every leadership in a community to provide security. Security should not even be considered to be costly. It should be a part of your budget and share it with us. We should never be asked to provide for a police. We should see it as a part of the taxes that we pay, which is enormous, of whatever I asked about, do they support our roads? I was told no. And what other facility do you see yourself as leaders of our community? Because we are part and parcel. We go to the supermarkets, we go to the stores, we spend money. May you consider this as unfortunate, but you should reconsider.
Thank you.
My name is Ron Conti. I live in Heritage Village. I'd just like to remind you, most of the people on this board, that when you were running for office, Mr. First Selectman, your main push was you've maintained the budget without reducing services. Let me tell you something. This is a reduction in service. I was president of the village in 2014 when the CRO was first assigned to the village. Ed Edelson was the first selectman. We interviewed 6 people who wanted the job, so I find it difficult to believe that nobody wants the job. I know your thinking is, well, we have an officer that patrols there
twice a day. Well, the fact of the matter is he's going 35 miles an hour, and he isn't really patrolling. People don't get to know him. You've got to understand, the people in the village knew the officer. They trusted the officer. They felt secure. You know, once you get above 55, 60, 65, you need, it's the perception of things. It's not always the reality of things. You know, the officer's not gonna run around, the officer's not gonna run around and prevent things. I understand that, because he's not gonna see him, but he's gonna be there, and he's gonna be able to intercede when there's a resident against resident. He's gonna be there immediately to intercede when there's domestic violence. He's gonna be able to intercede when people are being scammed. He's gonna be able to go to condo meetings or trustee meetings so that he can inform people of what's important for the city. Remember, not only do we pay taxes, but if tomorrow there were no volunteers, and most of those volunteers come from the village. If there were no volunteers, where would you be? Thank you. My 2 minutes is up.
I think I might be in the minority, but let me offer you my opinion. I'm Don Antilla. I'm a resident of Southbury since 1967. And at age almost 79, I'm right in the age class of many of our fellow Heritage Villagers. We live in a residential home near the Oxford border. My belief is that public corporations and every municipal town management should always strive to treat every employee and every citizen equally with respect to services and fair tax assessments. My wife and I pay our taxes, and we expect a fair and equal treatment and equal level of town services. I think that's pretty basic, and I suspect that most people would agree. We live at the outer edge of Southbury's town limits, and we've had a few instances where police support was required. And I gotta tell you, I was impressed at how fast and how professional the police were when they took care of a few problems over the years. In all of our 55 years in Southbury, I never thought that we deserved specific or needed dedicated police support and patrolling for our part of town. All we ever expected was good, timely, professional support, and that's what we got. We never thought that our neighborhood, which abuts the Oxford town line, required or deserved any patrol presence more so than any other sector of the town. So I look at it and I say fair is fair. All citizens deserve an equal level of protection without an unbalanced or more intense or less intense police presence anywhere in town. So I recommend you not set up any special support in any sector of town, and I think that you ought to provide equal police protection for all citizens, which to me is the only fair way to treat 20,000 taxpayers. I don't think I'm going to get a lot of applause, but that's my opinion.
Thank you.
Good evening, Shanna Bertram, Weston Hook Terrace. I've been a resident and taxpayer since 2008, and I fully support the reinstatement and retention of a full-time Heritage Village resource officer. Unlike our community where I live, there is a high concentration of people within that Heritage Village group. It's not just the village, as has been stated before, it's other additional communities, and these are seniors that do need the attention of the resource officer as outlined on our website. My second point, I see item D is the detective job description. I would ask that the Board of Selectmen disclose the training costs and specialized equipment that would be needed for a full-time Southbury Police Department detective. Are we training for a blood splatter analysis? Are we training for sexual assault? Are we training for crime scene mapping? And why, since we're contracted with Troop A, who has a major crime scene unit already, are we considering an independent detective for our own force? I don't believe that I have seen an answer to that question yet. Lastly, I would ask that the Board of Selectmen, and specifically the first Selectman, who is noted in Section 601 of our town charter as the Chief of Police, please provide the community of Southbury with a weekly police report in a locally published paper. Thank you. We should not be reading about vehicle smash and grabs from a Danbury paper. We should not be hearing about 3 overdose deaths with 2 fentanyl-related deaths within that 3 on the Patch online community. And the citizens of Southbury should not have to rely on community Facebook pages for their critical safety information. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Good evening. My name is Michael Carrington. I live at 76 Reservoir Road. That is not in the village, but I know the village is a great place. I'm here tonight on the specific issue of the CRO and more broadly on general senior services in this town. As I understand it, the CRO position worked very well in the past, and it was something that villagers and the greater senior community came to rely upon, and I don't think it should be taken away. I've reviewed many of the statistics, and it appears the CRO position has been more than justified to meet the unique security needs of seniors. That said, beyond the statistics, there's also the important peace of mind that comes from having a dedicated, reliable, experienced community police officer and presence for seniors. It's very similar to the comfort that parents like myself enjoy in Southbury, where the town now employs a specific youth officer as well as a school resource officer. Different communities have different needs, and we should address them all. We all share in this beautiful town, and everyone's needs ought to be listened to, considered, balanced, and respected. I'm clearly not a senior citizen, but I'm extremely thankful for Southbury's vibrant senior community. The simple math is that seniors contribute taxes, support town and school budgets, contribute immensely to our local town economy, and volunteer all over and get relatively little back in return. I don't think they're asking for much. And I think town leadership needs to be doing a lot more for seniors going forward, and I would encourage you to address the CRO position. I think that's a great place to start. Thank you.
Any other public?
Hello, my name is Deborah Brody. I live at 218B in Heritage Village. And I just want to say I came here with a lot of words in my heart, but everyone has already spoken them. So I want to express my gratitude to everyone for lifting up so many very important points. And I just want to say that I feel we all are joined together in a covenant of community. And the first thing, the most important thing in that covenant is to listen to each other. Now, before coming in here today, I was able to listen to Officer Grillo, and he responded to my question, why is it that it seems that police officers are reluctant to serve in the village? And he said very frankly to me, well, the problem is overtime, because the base pay, many officers feel it's not sufficient to support their livelihood and their needs for their families. Now, my thinking is that if we are instituting a detective, and that detective will indeed be eligible for and receive sufficient overtime to meet the needs of himself and his family, can we not meet the needs of the village by having the base pay of a community resource officer be approximately equal to what the town would be spending anyway in providing that overtime? There, all people's needs are met, the officers' needs are met, and the people's needs are met. I think that a compromise is possible, And I ask for all of us to listen to each other and find a way where we can fulfill our responsibility to each other, which is to make sure that for all of us, Southbury is our happy home. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
My name is Alan Mayle. I live in Heritage Village. I moved here about 6 years ago, and we had a full-time community resource officer. We did not lose the community resource officer. The community resource officer was taken away from us through no fault of our own. We did not stop paying taxes. We are good citizens of Southbury. We are not a blight on Southbury. We are a benefit to Southbury. We shop at your shops. We use the movie. We volunteer. We are a benefit to Southbury. I find it upsetting that we come here today, as one woman said, to beg to get our community resource officer back. You should consider it your duty to provide us with a community resource officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any other public comment?
Good evening. How do you start your day? As a leader in Southbury, you have the power through words and actions to help your community. As a wife and mother, I begin my day taking care of my family. As a resident advocate, I then attend meetings and discuss the betterment of the village with our team. We make sure we address problems and come up with solutions, not excuses. We take our responsibility seriously. Think about the tenets: respect, responsibility, and compassion. Do they drive your decision-making? I ask you to take a long, hard look at your decisions and how they affect the welfare of our community residents. I leave you with the words of my dad: what all of you are, we all were. What we are, you will all become. In this, how you would like to be treated. We are not asking for any more than we had. You just took it away. Now, how did you end your day? Did you help someone today? You had the power to make a positive difference. Did you? Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Yes, sir.
My name is Frank Calens-Ruscio, and I'm a resident of Heritage Village. And I had not planned on speaking tonight, but one of the things that one of the residents brought up reminded me of a comment that was made at one of the earlier meetings, and that was that none of the officers in town wanted to take the position of the resource officer. And I've been fortunate enough to meet a few of you officers, and they are wonderful individuals, and I just find that so hard to believe. Now, we're very, very thankful to have this officer here tonight. And this is a question. And this basically is the bottom line. And this is a question for everybody here in the audience and everybody on the stage. Don't you feel secure and protected having this officer here tonight? This is exactly what we need. This is exactly what we want. He represents respect. He represents authority. He respects integrity, and he also offers authority. we need that type of individual, and we need protection, and enough have been said here tonight about that. So, and I'm sure the question of overtime, there's ways of working around that, and I'll let our leaders answer that question. But in any event, I think it's important, and I think we have a lot of respect for the officers that are here, and we thank you you're here tonight.
Thank you. Yes, sir. By all means.
My name is Peter Weiss, and I live in the village. I heard a lot of good things here, and I agree with most of them. The one thing that I do want to remind you is that we pay taxes and we vote. And we hope that you take into account our needs that were taken away. Thank you.
Hi, I live in Heritage Village with my mom, and I came here about 1.5 years ago to help her out. And previously, you did help my mom out, and I appreciate that, having to do with some heating unit thing. And the only reason why my mom got help was because my sister wrote a very forceful letter, and then she got action. So I wanted to point out that we shouldn't have to do anything forceful to get the quality service we deserve. And I also noticed we're missing a selectman. I'd like to know who that is and why that person isn't here. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
My name is Frances Davis, and I live in Heritage Village. I think our position has been stated very, very clearly, but there were two things that were said tonight that I wanted to comment on. One is that we have an officer patrolling our village twice a day, supposedly. I don't know. I haven't seen him. But that he drives around, and then somebody complained, well, he drives around at 35 miles an hour twice a day, and that's hardly patrolling. Well, I just wanted to say, the speed limit in the village is 25.
I don't normally comment, but we'll take note of that. Is there any other public comment? Is there any other public comment? Is there any other public comment? Hearing none, we will close that portion of it. Just for the record, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen in the board, Greg could not be here tonight. He had a medical emergency, and he is on some pain meds and recovering as much as he can. And frankly, that's why he couldn't, he asked me, and I forgot in the beginning, but that's why he was not here. He's not here tonight. I do believe he is watching the streaming for sure. If we can have the presentation by the Southbury Police Department. We have a PowerPoint presentation for the Board of Selectmen. I want to remind everybody that this is a presentation for the Board of Selectmen to explain the policing and the detective job description there. So Chris, could you let me see if I can, if you could come up. So this will start with a data report on the town of Southbury and Heritage Village. Let me see if I can use the electronic devices. This is the population of Southbury. There is 19,681 people. This is approximate, not to the date, but there's 4,500 Heritage Village residents, which represents 23% of our population. This data report was given to me by the Southbury Police Department over a 3-year span from August 1st, 2019 to September 1st of 2022. That's a 3-year span. This is a chart that shows the Southbury calls for service during that 3-year time period provided by our police, by Chris Grillo. Sergeant Grillo gave me this. There was 41,182 calls for service to the Southbury Police Department during that time that they responded to, of which there was 1,682 calls in the village of that 41,182. Out of the 41,182 calls for service to the Southbury Police Department and 1,682 calls were to Heritage Village. This amounts to 4% of the Southbury Police Department's call volume per the police, only 4%. Top 2 calls for service in Heritage Village, of all the calls, the top 2 calls were for Heritage Village, well-being and untimely deaths, which amounted to 369. Out of the 1,682 calls for service to Heritage Village, 369 calls for well-being checks and untimely deaths. This amounts to 22% of the police response to Heritage Village. This is Southbury Police patrol areas. If you'll take note, a police officer is assigned to and patrols Heritage Village every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Also notice that the Patrol 3 is Heritage Village, and that area is the smallest geographical area of Southbury. There's always a patrol officer assigned to Heritage Village. There's been no CRO since August of 2020. All Heritage Village calls effectively handled by patrol officers for the past 2 years. Patrol 3 is the smallest geographical area. The CRO was responsible for the greater Heritage Village area. Southbury Police Department is not affiliated with Heritage Village Security. That's just a point of clarification. Total calls to Heritage Village versus the CRO investigated calls. Of the 1,682 calls to Heritage Village, 274 calls were handled by the CRO during that time. Percentage of Heritage Village calls investigated by the CRO, out of the 1,682 calls for service to Heritage Village, 270 calls were investigated by the Community Resource Officer. This amounts to 16% of the Heritage Village calls, police calls in response. Only 16% were handled by the CRO. Total townwide calls versus CRO investigations. This was supplied by the Southbury Police Department. In a 3-year time span of the 41,182 calls for service, the CRO handled only 274 calls for service during that time. Percentage of the town calls investigated by the CRO, calls investigated by the CRO Community Resource Officer, this amounts to less than 1% of the town of Southbury's total police response. Again, this was supplied by our police department. The detective positions facts. The detective will investigate cases townwide, brings an additional officer to all patrol areas during the day. The detectives bring specialized investigative knowledge to cases including identity theft, financial crimes, fraud, as well as crimes such as assaults. More efficient and effective ways to provide the same training resources. Town departments can provide comprehensive community resources to Heritage Village and town residents more effectively and efficiently than a dedicated Heritage Village CRO. The police department, Social Security, Senior Center, Public Library provides all the town residents more community resources. Workshops such as the ones the town has provided in the past include topics such as scam protection, safety and security, retirement, tax filing services, and things of this nature. No-cost services to residents by existing town departments and maximizes town resources. This is a letter from Southbury Police Sergeants dated September 1st, 2022. And I don't know if everybody can read that. Chris, do you, I can read, or you have the, I think I'll just read it. This is September 1st, 2022. Can we bring up the actual letter, not in the PowerPoint? Is that possible? Let me read it into the, let's see how they do here. This is to the Board of Selectmen. Over the last couple of weeks, we have heard and seen residents of Heritage Village who have expressed concerns over the changes to the CRO position. Unfortunately, it appears that residents have been misled or given inaccurate information. Below, we have compiled some of the facts and statistics that may better educate the residents of Heritage Village, helping them understand the management of our police personnel. In concurrence with the police contract, an officer was last assigned to the position of CRO on August 1st of 2019. This officer worked as the CRO Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. until 3 p.m. On August 19th, 2020, the CRO was injured while lifting a patient in Heritage Village and has not yet returned to work full duty. During the CRO's off hours and on weekends, the area of Heritage Village is covered by a patrol officer. The patrol area that encompasses Heritage Village is depicted on the attached map. Since the beginning of 2022, we have begun to review the structure of the Southbury Police Department due to the high demand and limited resources available. The School Rover Patrol and the Community Resource Officer positions are explicitly identified as positions that could be modified to benefit the entire town better. We decided to transition the CRO into a detective position to establish an officer with specialized training to assist the numerous roles for the town, for the whole of the town, including investigations. This decision was made because of the evolving role of a police officer. The Police Accountability Bill and new laws require an officer to do more investigative steps during a criminal investigation. The town of Salisbury has also seen an uptick in property crime, particularly in the 100 Main Street North Plaza. The calls for service for 100 Main Street North, one of the many business locations in towns, has nearly doubled the calls for service than Heritage Village. There has also been a town-wide increase in scams and financial crimes, which require multiple investigative steps. The statistics show these crimes are not localized to the residents of Heritage Village. We have compiled some statistics on the attached following pages. These statistics represent the time period the CRO was assigned to Heritage Village to present day, August 1st of 2019 and September 1st of 2022. The Southbury Police Department currently employs 21 officers. Today I swore another officer in, so we're up to 22. 3 are out injured, 2 which may not return to work. Of the 21 officers, 3 are sergeants, 1 is a school resource officer, and 1 is a youth officer. This leaves 13 officers remaining for patrol and other needs. With these limited resources in mind, it would be improper management to assign someone to only patrol to only a portion of the town when the position would benefit the entire town, especially when there is an officer assigned to a patrol on every shift that strictly covers Heritage Village. See Patrol 3 on the attached map. After deciding to change the position of the CRO to detective, we reached out to Mr. Leventhal on April 22nd of 2022 to introduce ourselves, since the CRO was currently out of work for an extended period of time and did not appear he would return to duty. The purpose of the communication was to let him know the CRO was going to be vacant and the Southbury Police would still make sure all the law enforcement needs of Heritage Village were satisfied. Mr. Leventhal arranged for us to meet him on April 25th of 2022 at the Heritage Village Meeting House. He notified us the new Chief Operating Officer would also be available at this time. Mr. Leventhal was the only one present at the meeting with the two of us on April 25th, 2022. We discussed the needs of Heritage Village and notified him of the change of position from CRO to detective. He told us, we told him to contact us with any further questions or issues and not the CRO because he was out of work. We gave him our contact information with cell phone numbers. Soon after, we were notified by the CRO, who was out of work, that Mr. Leventhal had contacted him about the position. Mr. Leventhal has not contacted either of us since April 25th of 2022 with any concerns. On July 13th of 2022, we met with Dan Drew, COO, Bill McKenna, Compliance Officer, and Tracy Ann Samuel, Director of Security, for an introduction meeting at Heritage Village. Mr. Drew only briefly attended the meeting before leaving for a more pressing matter. For approximately 1 hour, we spoke with the Compliance Officer and Director of Security about the needs of Heritage Village. We notified them of the change of position to detective. We emphasized the open line of communication between their office and ours. At no point did they raise any concern about the detective position. We gave them our contact information with cell phone numbers and told them to contact us with any issues. We have communicated with them on multiple occasions via email or phone calls about various topics, none of which involve the concern of changing the position of the detective. In conclusion, we want the Board of Selectmen, Town of Southbury, and most importantly, the residents of Heritage Village to know we will continue to provide the utmost professional services to them. And this was respectfully submitted, Sergeant Chris O'Grillo and Southbury Police Department, and Sergeant Kyle Rapp, Resident Trooper, Town of Southbury. Can I have the PowerPoint back? Okay. This, did we get the, this is a, we were asked to get an opinion by our town labor attorney on the matter of the contract that we currently have. Let me see if I have that contract. I think it's in our packet here. Yes, sir. Here, I can use mine.
Before we get into the other documents and opinion from council, can we maybe open up to any questions anyone might have of Sergeant Grillo regarding the police stats? If that's possible.
Okay, so I think, yeah, the Board of Selectmen. Let me just run through this. This is the response from our labor attorney. You have asked me to provide a legal opinion regarding the recent agreement to replace the position of Community Resource Officer with a detective position during negotiation for the current collective bargaining agreement. Specifically, during the negotiations, the town of Southbury, the town, and Southbury Police Association, the union, agreed to remove the position of CRO from the collective bargaining agreement and negotiated to the position of detective in its place. My understanding is that the officer who was serving in the capacity of the CRO has been out of work on workman's compensation injury off and on for more than 1 year prior to negotiating the agreement to eliminate the CRO position and create the detective position. It is also my understanding that during the CRO's absence, there has been no officer assigned to Heritage Village in the capacity of CRO. Rather, Patrol 3 was and continues to be assigned to Heritage Village. While I was not directly involved in the discussions with the union, it is my understanding that the union and the town specifically discussed creating and filling the position of detective. Ultimately, the town agreed that the best use of town resources would be to fill the position of detective. It was, however, important to the town that the Heritage Village needs continue to be addressed. As a result, the job description for the detective's position provides that the officer who fills the position of detective will serve as a liaison to Heritage Village, thereby ensuring that concerns of Heritage Village residents will continue to be addressed. In addition, as noted above, Patrol 3 has and will continue to patrol Heritage Village to ensure the safety of its residents. Given the recent negotiations, you asked what would happen if the town, after negotiating the creation of the detective position, did not fill the position, but rather reinstituted the position of CRO. Simply put, the union would file a prohibited practice complaint pursuant to the Municipal Employees Relation Act, alleging that the town was in violation of Connecticut Statute 7-474 by bargaining in bad faith. It is my legal opinion that based upon the aforementioned facts, the union would prevail in a contested case before the Connecticut Board of Labor Relations. If you have any questions, concerns in this correspondence, please contact me. Sincerely, William Ryan, our labor attorney. So with that, Chris, sorry to have you stand up there for so long.
Jeff, this is with the other police letter that got skipped, if you
Okay.
wanted to read it.
There's also the letter from the resident trooper, which explains there's been some questions, the board, there's been some questions about detectives' positions, what services we have or don't have, and what the state police contract gives. So I will read this into the record. It was September 21st of 2022. This is in regard to the resident trooper program. For Selectman Jeffrey Manville, the overall concept of the resident trooper program is the assignment of a state trooper or sergeant to a specific town to provide the law enforcement needs. The assignment of the state trooper also brings the resources of the state police, such as the major crime unit. Towns that participate in the resident trooper program already fall under the jurisdiction of the local state police barracks and usually have a state police patrol trooper covering the town. The resident trooper is there to be a law enforcement officer and a community liaison to the town. Although the overall concept of the program is the same in each town participating in the resident trooper program, there is a uniqueness to each town. The town of Southbury has the second largest number of officers in the resident trooper program. The only town with more officers is Montville, which voted to go to independent on September 20th of 2022. Much of the law enforcement needs of the town requires can be fulfilled by the Southbury Police Department because of how much the town has invested in Southbury Police. The Southbury Police is large enough and capable enough that the state police rarely need to assist. The resident trooper sergeant assigned to the town is required to do administrative duties such as assigning reports and overseeing the operation of the entire police department. A resident trooper town in a smaller town such as Washington would be functioning the same way as a police patrol officer in Southbury does. I know concerns have been raised about the need for a detective in town and why state police major crime cannot handle the cases requiring a detective. The state police major crime unit is assigned complex and serious criminal cases in areas under the Connecticut State Police jurisdiction and towns with their own police departments. This is dependent upon if a town or state's attorney office requires major crime. Much like the rest of law enforcement agencies right now, the state police has limited resources. The major crime at Troop A has only 3 detectives who cover from the New York line to Cheshire. The majority of the criminal cases in town do not raise to the level of requesting major crime, just like how the majority of accidents do not require the state police accident reconstruction team to assist. The detective position for the town was designed to assist the patrol officers with their heavy workload of criminal cases and take over criminal cases that would not rise to the level of major crime. These lengthy cases would take a patrol officer away from the town for an extended time. As we previously spoke about, the current state of the police work requires officers to do more work for criminal cases concerning search and seizure warrants. The creation of the detective's position is in response to this current state. The resident trooper program in Southbury provides the state police assistance and resources when the town requires them. However, the police officers in Southbury are exceptionally well trained and competent, which only requires the state police to assist in major incidents. This is a credit to the town of Southbury for creating such an accomplished police department. The position of detective in Southbury does not limit the resources of work from the state police. It better supports the police officers and residents of Southbury. Respectfully, Sergeant Kyle Rapp, Southbury resident state trooper. Chris, could you, there was a question about being the chief of police, and can you just touch on that a little bit about why I am the chief of police and my limited duties?
Southbury is a unique town in the sense that we do have a large police force. It is a post-certified police force, but we run under the resident state trooper program, which means that the police force is governed under the auspices of the Connecticut State Police. They provide support and police protection through the town in addition to municipal officers. By state statute, any department that does not have an organized department, the police chief, by state statute, is the first selectman or city mayor, depending on the type of municipality. So it's by state statute that appoints that takes Mr. Manville is the police chief.
Are there any questions from the board? If you would just raise your hand so I could recognize you. Selectman Bucksbaum. Oh, sorry.
Thanks for being here tonight, Sergeant Grillo, and for all of your service to the community over many years. I just had a couple of questions. First off, there was some discussion about patrols and patrol areas and how that works. Can you just describe how patrols work generally in town, and then how they work specifically in the village?
Yeah, so in short, we have 3 shifts. We run patrols for each shift. So a patrol is a designated area that an officer is assigned at the beginning of the shift. That ensures that the town is properly covered with the manpower that is available for that day. So as the slide showed, that we do have a patrol 3, which covers the area of Heritage Village, and there is an officer assigned to that patrol every day, every shift.
Thank you. With the data that was presented, I understand it was over a 3-year period. That my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 of those 3 years there was no CRO in Heritage Village at that time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. When you looked at the data over the 3-year period, did you see any change in call volume or whatnot from that first year where there was a CRO, and then the following 2 years where there was no CRO in the village?
The call data is pretty steady for the 3 years.
Okay, thank you. And I know we got the letter from Sergeant Rapp that gave the resident troopers perspective on detective services and how that works, and how what we're looking for is different from what's offered by the state and what we have available to us for major crimes and things of that nature. But I think it's important for all of us to also hear the local perspective. And we've, members of this body, especially those of us who've been around a while, have heard it for many years from you in budget discussions and whatnot. Can you just sort of explain in your own words why you think a detective is important for us to have in this town?
Absolutely. First, for anyone that doesn't know, Sergeant Kyle Rapp is a resident state trooper. He's assigned to the town of Southbury. He is in our office Monday through Friday. So the Connecticut State Police provides services. Those services are not unique just to resident trooper towns. If you are a town that cannot support that type of investigation, major crime will come out. So even if you're an organized police department and you have a homicide in your town, if your police department cannot support that investigation, the Connecticut State Police or the state's attorney's office will appoint somebody to come out there and assist with the investigation. So that's a service that's just not provided to us, that is provided to other police departments. The detective in Southbury will support the patrol officers. So policing has changed. It's changed a lot since I started. And with every year and every new law, more and more is added to the police officer's job. Investigations which were once very simple are now becoming more complex. And every time that there is a more complex investigation, it obviously lends to more time. When you have an officer spending more time in investigation, that means he's not patrolling. So if an officer is on patrol and he's able to be visible, he's able to check his businesses, meet residents, talk to people, that's the community policing that we heard here today, and that's very important to our community. If that officer is tied up sitting at a desk investigating an identity theft, that's going to take him off the streets. The flip side to that is when he's trying to do a really good job on that identity theft investigation, he may get a car accident in his patrol. So he folds up his paperwork, his investigation. He may be on hold with a bank. He puts that aside, responds to the car accident. He now has a car accident. Once he handles the car accident, he can then return to the office. He pulls out his paperwork again and reopens his investigation. He may get another call for a 911 hang-up. So he closes up his paperwork. He goes, it's not an efficient way to do policing. So by having a detective, we can use a detective that can do a lot of the legwork, a lot of the stuff that requires in-depth investigations or more time spent in the office, and then keep the patrol officers on the street where they're more valuable to us, where they're out in the community, where they're talking to people, where they're checking businesses, where they're visible. We talked about the Southbury Plaza being a high target area right now for some of the stores. People are going in the stores in broad daylight and just taking stuff, and they walk out with it. They're not running. They're not trying to hide it. It's not trying to disguise themselves. It's just plain as day because they know certain things. So we're dealing with a lot of incidents like that. So being visible is deterring those crimes, throughout the rest of the town.
Thank you. And then the last question I have is, we have the detective job description that we're voting on tonight. I've reviewed the police contract, which we all voted on, that has the detective position. There's some verbiage in the detective job description, the reason we're all here tonight, that talks about the detective being a liaison to Heritage Village. Can you explain how you envision that role? What you envision this, obviously the detective is going to be doing all the stuff you just explained. Can you explain what role, what services you envision at the outset? Obviously it's a new position, we're all going to have to evaluate this over time, but how you envision it going and what services you envision providing in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say that, and I hope I'm not speaking out of line here, but I'm overwhelmed by the support that the people that spoke here today and the people that showed up here today have given the police department. In 20 years of law enforcement, I don't know if I've ever been in a room with so many people saying such nice things about us. So it's overwhelming. But the reason that line was worked into the job description is because, and like we've said before, we do believe that there's an importance and there is a need for a contact in certain situations. And having somebody that you can go to with issues is always better than just trying to pick up the phone and call somebody and see who you get. It's somebody that has, a familiar a face, a familiar voice, somebody that has the right contact information. So if there's a certain person that you can call every time, they're not going to be the person that responds to every call. But if you know you can pick up the phone and call somebody, it's more efficient. We have this for animal control. We have 2 liaison officers in the police department that are liaisons for animal control. Animal cases are something we don't deal with a lot. They are pretty unique. So we have two officers that the animal control officer could call directly, and so they have their contact information, they share the same knowledge of animal cases. It's just a more efficient way to do things when you have somebody that you can contact directly. We knew when the CRO was not going to be that contact, even though he hadn't been there for a couple of years. We still, as the police department, wanted to leave that line of communication available to the village. And we said, well, the detective is, quote unquote, replacing the CRO. Let's task him with being the contact, and then he can then notify the supervisor or dispatch what needs to be done. So that's our envision of having him as a liaison for the village, of having somebody that they can go to and somebody they can reach out to. Or her, yes, thank you. Thank you.
Holly?
Okay, thank you so much. So what's really kind of interesting is sort of the rules of order of when we have these meetings, and it's this is kind of the first time we actually have an opportunity to engage and have any discussion, just because we have to follow the protocol, the rules, and all of that. So it's interesting to finally get to say something about this. So what I think and correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from what I think I hear you saying is that the idea was, okay, we have this role that hasn't been filled in some time, and if we're able to have somebody who does more desk work, but they are a contact person, they can still have the relationship that the CRO had, but yet have more presence, technically, because they're not being pulled out to car accidents and other things constantly. Is that correct? Or is there anything you want to clarify around that?
No, you're correct.
Okay, very good. So, and I think that was, and I think this is where there might be some misunderstanding or misconception of what the discussion was when we've talked about this with you leading up to this. Is it fair to say that this was an effort to fill the position, not an effort to remove the position?
That's correct. That's
And
correct.
that was my takeaway when we talked about this, and we said, hey, if we could brainstorm and try to figure out how to make this more attractive and how to get somebody in there, this is something we can do to actually fill the role so that there is somebody back in that position. Of the 7 years that the CRO position existed, how much time was that position actively filled? Was there a gap between the first officer and the second officer? So of the 7 years, how much time was actually physically filled by somebody in the role that was not off on disability?
That's a great question. I don't have the exact number of years, but I can tell you a little history of the CRO. The CRO backs, I think even before that, we wanted a school resource officer. There was a selectman on the board at the time that was opposed to an SRO, so we called it a CRO, and that's where the community resource officer was kind of developed. He was assigned to the high school, but labeled as a community resource officer. In future contracts, we were able to make it a full-time permanent SRO position. And the CRO language stayed in the contract, and that's where it kind of got filled with a CRO that did the greater Heritage Village area. So the first police officer that was signed to the greater Heritage Village area as a CRO worked there for, and I'm just guessing here, I think it was probably it was a long time. He was there for a while. He was out injured for a long time as well. When he retired, there was a gap before the new CRO was hired. When the new CRO was hired, he was there for about a year before, unfortunately, he got injured, and unfortunately, he hasn't been returned to work yet.
Okay, got it. So how long did that position exist? And forgive me for not knowing this, but for how long did the position exist in the village? And my understanding was about 7 years. And is that incorrect? And do I need to go back and look at that again?
I think it was sometime around 2014.
Okay, thank you. And then another question that I had, and this is something that is concerning for me when I hear a lot of voices about people thinking that there was no discussion about this, or that this was somehow dropped on the village with no forewarning. You spoke with leadership personally at Heritage Village prior to this negotiation, correct?
We did.
You did. And at no point in time has the village reached out to you with any questions, concerns, anything of that nature until after this board unanimously, every single one of us, voted on it based on the information that we had.
That was the first I heard any concerns, yes.
Thank you for that.
And if I can just add to one thing, when we talked about the detective being the liaison to Heritage Village, there's a very high probability that if there is an in-depth investigation in the village, you're getting the detective. And I don't think I made that clear, that that was another reason for making him as him or her as the liaison, because if there's a major identity theft or a large financial crime, that's the person that's going to support the patrol officer in the investigation. So that was the second part of that.
I did notice that that was a highlight of what the detective would be doing, was financial crimes and scams, which is a huge concern for that potential population.
Selectman Betty? Might have to just share it, there you go. Or share the mic. It's not that far away.
Hello? Thanks for coming this evening, everybody in the audience, and also Corporal Grill. Appreciate it. As you know, I've been helping the town craft budgets for about 14 years now. It's always disappointing when you have folks that are unhappy with what we've done. I do have to point out one thing, though. This was not unanimous amongst the 6 of us. I was not present in the executive session when this contract was voted on. I did not vote for or against it. In regards to the data, if you could clarify for me, you have information about overall call volume and CRO call volume. It's a 3-year period. Am I correct in thinking that the CRO only served one of those 3 years?
That's correct.
So it would have been more helpful if we had 1 year or backwards where it was equal amount of time that the CRO was present as the total call volume. The other thing that would have been, that is interesting to me, and perhaps we can get this, is to also throw up there how many calls the school resource officer receives and the youth officer, so that we can see what, what the overall picture is. And as you know, my cousin was the resource officer here at the high school for the last, whatever it was.
9 years.
9 years,
Yeah.
just retired. So, I've always supported you guys, and I always will. We fought for a couple years to get you guys that extra officer, and we did get it for you this year. But I'm concerned that we have such an outpouring of concern with what was done. So I'm hopeful that we can find a way to, it may not be possible contractually to add a CRO back into the rotation, but a way to have somebody in the village, whether it's the detective or somebody else, that can be on site and make people feel protected, because perception is reality. And perhaps you could help us understand why it is that this position is not something that officers are eager to do. I'm sure there's a couple of key points of why it's not as desirable as, say, being the youth officer, which is currently staffed.
So I can tell you where that information stemmed from. Prior to any discussion of a detective position, we informally asked the members of the police department, the patrol officers, anybody interested. Let me digress for a second. Per the contract, the CRO position is a 3-year term, and that's determined by our contract. So knowing that the term was coming up and contract negotiations were about to start, we informally asked, or polled the police department if anybody would be interested in putting in for the CRO position, and no one was at that time. So that's where that stemmed from. So given that no one was eager to take the position, the question came about, if the position remains, do we force somebody into that position? And right now, not just the town of Southbury and not just the state of Connecticut, but nationwide, law enforcement is really strapped, and they're having a real difficult time hiring police officers. It's a tough time for police. It's a tough time for people in general. There's a lot of jobs out there that are available that pay very well. There's a lot of jobs out there that don't require you to work weekends or holidays or wear a bulletproof vest. So there's a lot of good jobs out there, and it's not to say that being a policeman is a bad job. I've been here for 20 years. I'm not a resident of Southbury, but I love this town. I treat it like it is my town. This is a great profession, and I wouldn't change coming into this. So, having said that, we didn't have anybody that was willing to come into the position, so we had started the conversation of what do we do if we don't have somebody willing to come into the position. Right now, our biggest issue is retention and recruitment. We're trying to get police officers, and we're trying to keep the ones that we have. And if we take someone and put them in the position per our contract, it would have to be the junior officer. So the junior officers generally come in. Those are the officers that, and I'm speaking in general terms here, but generally we hire a younger officer. They're not committed to a family yet. They're not really tied down to anything, children or anything. Generally, those are the men and the women that want to work some overtime. Their salary is at the base pay, so they want to work some overtime where they don't have a lot of responsibilities, so they can afford to, move to town or, move out of their parents' house or whatever. So the question was, do we take somebody that is at the bottom of the roster and we force them in the position now? Is this going to help our retention? We're trying to keep people, and if someone says, I signed up because I want to be, a patrol officer and this is what I want to do, and now I'm forced into a specialized position, which I'm not saying that no police officer will like, and through history we've shown that there's been officers in the department that have loved to be there, and they've done a great job and proven that they've loved it. But at this point, do we do that? Do we put somebody in that position and then run the risk of them saying, hey, I didn't sign up for this, now I'm being forced into it, I'm going to go to another police department. And that's a fear, not just putting somebody in a position, but a fear of the police department as a whole, and not just ours, every police department. Losing somebody is tough. It takes, not to go into too much detail, but it takes us over a year to hire a police officer. And I don't have to tell that to the board. I mean, you guys know, I've set up many budgets and, explained it. But it's not easy to get a police officer. It's not easy to get a certified police officer. We're not an independent police department. We're a resident trooper program. So it's very rare that we're getting somebody from an established police department to come to a resident trooper town. Sometimes, we do get lucky and we get a good certified transfer, but it's not that common. So that's what it was, and the discussion, and there was comments made about like overtime. It's not about the money, it's about the retention, and that the money does play into, or the overtime does play into, what the decision of younger officers may take. But I can't speak on their behalf, but I can tell you on behalf of the retention part of it. That's a huge part.
Go ahead, Holly, you have a...
All right, there we go. And Justin, my apologies. I didn't recall that you were absent. I just recall that everyone in the room was, sorry, I'll be a little louder. Everyone that was in the room did not object. So my follow-up question to that is, would the detective that now is in that position and serves as a liaison to Heritage Village, as was defined, would that person now be eligible for overtime?
Yes. The position of a detective is an assignment, but yes, they would still be eligible for overtime.
So it incentivizes someone to take what was a vacant position for several years.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
It would incentivize somebody to take the position which had sat empty for several years.
The detective position?
Well, I'm sorry, I should clarify this.
Sorry.
What I'm asking is, Heritage Village went without anyone filling this role for several years. By creating it into a detective position that is eligible for overtime and has some of these other specialized responsibilities, that would encourage somebody to want to fill that role, as opposed to having nobody filling the role of a liaison with Heritage Village.
Right, absolutely. And I just want to clarify, though, that, and it's been said a couple of times, I don't want the overtime part to seem like it's part of the equation. The overtime is the explanation of when we were talking about if we're forcing somebody into it, a reason that it may not be good for retention. So it's not about the overtime, it's more about the retention, and that was the component of the retention, of the mindset of a younger officer.
John?
So I guess, and this is a little bit just to clarify again, I think what Justin said a little bit about when this was presented to us as a vote on that contract, the one thing that we were told is that there would be a job description that the detective position was basically combined with the community resource officer for the Greater Heritage Village. So just to clarify, and I don't know if there were, and again, I jumped right in. I do apologize. Thank you for your service, everything you've done here, the presentation. Thanks for everybody else being here. But when I spoke to Jerry and Dan, and then even my feeling of when we were reviewing the contract, is that the SRO, the community resource officer, and the detective would be kind of a merged position, and he would be doing the tasks that the community resource officer was doing. And I don't think this whole crowd and confusion and people starting to complain occurred until we actually got a job description, which was weeks after approving the contract. And I think it's the mismatch of detective position and what was the community resource officer, which is where all the concern or problems are. So I guess my first question is about the detective position. I mean, it looks like a pretty detailed position. It looks like there's a lot of work to be done there. Clearly, it seems that it needs to be done. It's something that's going to attract officers to stay, to aspire to be that position. How much time out of that shift work in this description, is that like 110% of the job duty? Is it 120? Like in a week's worth of work, will they be able to accomplish all this work? And how much time will they have to even deal with this community resource officer in the village, which is, one description. It says that they'll take phone calls from the village and then assign them to another police officer or assign them to the desk. Like they're not really doing tasks other than reassigning. So I'm just curious, like how much time would that detective actually have to do community resource work?
No, so that's a great question. I can't speak on any communications that the selectmen had, because obviously, the union wasn't part of that. But I can speak on the other part of the question and say that it's very difficult to quantify police work. The other day I had a lot of paperwork to do, and I sat down at my desk in the morning and I had every intentions to get through that paperwork, freedom of information, requests, the hiring process, selections, recruiting, and nothing got done because we got a report of a missing 3-year-old. So police work changes, it's fluid, and so it's very difficult to quantify and say, 75% of the time the person's going to be here. You may have a day they could dedicate 100% of their day there. You may have a day that they can't dedicate any because there was a major incident. So it wouldn't be fair to me to give you a number because it would just be a guess. The honest answer is it's fluid, it changes every day, and it's really the needs. It's not just the needs of one area, it's the needs of the town. If the needs are in Heritage Village, those are the needs. So I think it's maybe improper to label where these needs are as to they're in Heritage Village or they're not. I think that's an improper label. I think the best label is this is a need. It doesn't matter where it is. That's where we're going to focus our attention. So I'm sorry, I know I didn't directly answer your question in a number, but
so more of a follow-up to just kind of put that same concept continuing. So the description for the community resource officer, included, preventing and detecting, violations and that kind of stuff, but also, to deal with some drug and alcohol prevention up in the village, to help with, parking violations, act as an instructor for specialized short-term programs and develop expertise for various subjects, including but not limited to, vulnerabilities of seniors, attending meetings of community groups and solicit support and understanding for the police department. So it's, basically working with the security, working with some of the condo presidents, working with do you think that the detective who's, working on solving crimes, working on higher task issues, would be able to do that type of work in this, like the half a paragraph that's in the detective position?
So we're very fortunate. We have a lot of diversified officers at the PD, and we currently do this type of work for the entire town. We have officers that specialize in physical security assessments, active aggressor training. Just in October, I have on the calendar to go to one of the nursing homes and speak to the staff about active aggressors. If somebody comes in, with some ill intent. So we have people that specialize in certain things, and we provide those resources to everybody in town. We provide them to religious institutions, to the schools as well. So if there's a need in the town and someone reaches out to us and says, do you have somebody that can do a presentation on, identity theft? We'll find the best officer that we have available for it, and we'll give them that task, and we'll set something up. So it's not something that's going to disappear.
Gotcha. Just a couple other little quick ones here. So my understanding, when the CRO was up in the village area doing his work, he wasn't just locked in there. He wasn't just sitting at a desk. He was just like any other officer in any of the other 3 districts or zones, pulled to go, if there was an issue on Main Street or in a shopping area or on 84, he was pulled to go do that work, right? It wasn't like he was, not like a school resource officer that's kind of locked into a position there. He was moving around the rest of the town a bit.
So none of our officers are locked in, not even an officer on a construction job. If you see an officer wearing a yellow shirt, if there's a major incident, we need manpower, they're going to be there. When we had the report of, and just to clarify, it was an improper communication or type of call. There was no missing 3-year-old, so I don't want anybody to think there was a 3-year-old that was missing. That's how the call came in. It didn't turn out to be that. But when we did receive that call, we had about 15 police officers there in a matter of minutes, and that included, the school resource officer, and state troopers from the highway came down. It's one of those incidents where if you need manpower, we're going to get it. We had guys on construction jobs, same thing. They came over from their road jobs. So, yeah, absolutely. We utilize manpower where needed.
Cool. And just to bounce off that slide that showed the 41,482 compared to 275, dividing that over 3 years and then 3 shifts, right? Because we have 1 shift for the CRO, but 3 shifts in each one of those other areas. So dividing that number by 3 years, because we were only 1 year, 3 shifts versus 1 shift, and then 3 areas versus 1 area, that number really comes down to 1,500 compared to the 275. Would that make sense?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not following you.
So the CRO, in that list, it said 275 calls. That was 1 officer, it was 1 shift in 1 area. Whereas the 41,000 was 3 areas, 3 shifts in a day, and a 3-year period of time versus 1-year period of time. So when you take 41,000 divided by 3 shifts instead of 1 shift at the CRO, divided by 3 areas to our 1 area, and then divided by 3 years versus 1 year, and I might have doubled that, but basically there's 3 different items, 3 different times. When that all divides out, it's a much smaller number.
Right, so
I'm not, clearly not beating up on you, I'm just trying to make sure I got the number right.
No, and I appreciate that. The numbers depict the total calls for service townwide, and then the other number represents what the CRO did. Yes, he was out for 2 years, but so for those 2 years, he has no stats to speak.
Okay, so that larger number represented all policing, and the
Correct.
small number just, so then the division is even smaller, because it's actually divided by all 4 zones. Okay, well.
I'm sorry, I'm not following you.
So the data is basically, the large column represented the entire community. So there's 4 work zones, there were 3 shifts per day, and it was a 3-year period of time. So when you divide that number out by 4 areas, 3 shifts, 3 years, you get down to a number that would basically equal 1 shift in 1 area. The CRO number that was up there was 1 shift, 1 area.
1 shift, 1 area, correct.
Right, so when you divide it all out, it's a much lower number. So we'll cover it. Thank you. So one of the things I was just getting a little puzzled about is I see letters and notes here and stuff about the detective position and phasing it out, or phasing it in and phasing out the CRO back in April and June. And when did the CRO position get phased out, and when did the detective position get phased in, or the transition?
The contract was, I don't know the exact day the contract was signed, but the official date would be when the contract was signed.
Okay. Yeah. And this might be just, you can toss this back to Jeff if you need to. So this attorney letter that was presented in the, as far as for the Board of Selectmen in the town, it seems like we're asking that question again after the contract was signed, but who was working with you and the town board to, as an attorney, to make sure that we had all these T's crossed and I's dotted? I think that's actually just for Jeff in this presentation.
I'm not sure what the contract negotiations were between the Sergeant Grillo, who's head of the police union, and there was 2 others from the department representing the rank and file. It was Dan Colton and I think Claire Morris, HR, and I was not involved in the actual negotiations. And the contract was there, and then it was looked at through the department, and then was ratified.
So I guess what I'm asking is, did we have an attorney look at it?
We always have attorneys look at everything. They always do, to make sure it's contractually correct or not.
Is it the same attorney that's writing this letter? I'm missing that.
Yes. So, Chris, something Sergeant Grillo,
One more question, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
So were and I think you asked, I just want to clarify. So in the contract to get an SRO or a community resource officer to fill that position, it would be formally asked of an officer to do that task. And an officer would have to say, kind of, no, I don't want to do that, pass it on to the next person in line. Would that be somewhat in process?
If no one volunteered to put in for the position, let me digress a little bit. If multiple people put in for the position, then there would be a selection process. If one person put in for the position, we could forego the selection process and award that person with that position. If nobody put in for the position, then we would have to assign it. Per our contract, we have the ability to assign the junior-most officer to whatever shift that the department needs. So in that case, we likely would assign the junior officer. Questions came up with, the CRO job description says you have a minimum of 3 years experience. And we haven't had to cross this bridge yet, but the question was, if the job description says you have to have a minimum of 3 years experience and we're putting somebody in here that has a year right out of the academy, what does that say about the job description? Are we not honoring the 3 years? But our contract also says we can't force somebody with 3 years on because they're not the junior guy into that position. So luckily we didn't have to cross that bridge, but it was something that did come up.
Gotcha. And I thought it goes to seniority first, and then go move through the chain of command. Like would ask somebody who had more seniority first, and then. But what I'm getting at is there were no police officers that were formally asked, and nobody turned down the work. It didn't get filled.
No, prior to the signing of the contract, we did ask if anybody was interested in the position, and there's nobody interested at the time.
Okay, so, yeah. So, I mean, my goal, and we're gonna be talking about this a little bit later this evening, so maybe you can just help us out a little bit. Like, how do we fix the issue? Because I think, I mean, I heard a lot of people speak about that they would like a CRO, they pay plenty of taxes and stuff, but, so, I mean, there's gotta be a solution, like, and I'm thinking about, like, you know, whether you just hire somebody to do that position. I mean, we have empty slots that aren't being filled. It's hard to find a police officer. So, I mean, you're saying that. I mean, are there ways to hire, you know, a retired police officer that's looking for some part-time work, or a part-timer, or looking for somebody who doesn't want to work nights? I mean, can that job be, let's say, shopped out or headhunted out? And was that, did we attempt to do that?
When I got hired at the town of Salisbury back in 2002, they were looking to hire one officer. There was 180 applicants that I took the test with that day, the original test, the written test, physical test, the oral test, psychological, polygraph. There was 180 applicants. The last test that we gave, we got 23 applicants, and we were trying to fill 3 positions. Right now, we have the application open. We have 0 applicants. So I would love to fill the ranks and get the police officers that we have the slots for. And we try every day. It's just, we can't get the people. The other thing that the town has held steady for, and I commend the town for this, is we will not lower our standards just to fill the position. It's very important that we hire the right people here in Southbury. And we're not gonna lower the standards of the hiring process just so we can, you know, fill a seat. So it's difficult, you know, and our standards are no higher than any other, you know, town or municipality. We just want somebody here that fits, you know, what we believe in, and that's, you know, that's community.
Gotcha. And so that being said, is there a policy against not hiring somebody who was retired and on a second career, or part-time, or you know, somebody who doesn't want to work nights?
No, we currently have 3 officers that are retired from the Connecticut State Police that work for us.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate
that. I just have one other question. This goes back to what you were just talking about in recruitment and retention. There were a lot of comments tonight about budgetary issues. And I think there was an impression that somehow this position was cut for budgetary reasons. Last year, we increased the police budget, and I just think it's important for everybody to understand that. And we did that by adding a police officer. We were at 23. We added it to make it 24. It's no secret, I've been an advocate on this board to hire even more police officers. I'd like to see 25, 26. I think you probably agree with me. But there was a specific reason we didn't do that last year. And we didn't go to 25 or 26, and it's because the reason you just mentioned, in reality, we saw that we weren't gonna be able to fill those positions, and we didn't want to overtax the residents for positions we can't fill. But we are at that 24. That's what we're budgeted for, and we'd like to see them. And I think what you're explaining is that we've done work over the past, you know, since the new budget year. We've had, you know, Jeff swore someone in today, right? But there's people injured, and there's no one applying for the new position because of the realities in the world at the moment, which are unfortunate. But that's sort of where we are. But I think as a municipality, it's important to understand that we support policing and we support our police budgets, and we need more officers, and we've budgeted for them. And I just want to make sure people understand that. And I guess it's not really a question, but if you want to comment on it, but I just think that's an important part of what we've done and something we've advocated for as a body, to give you guys the resources you need. And I'd love to see more people in the department so we could fill all the needs and all the roles of the community.
Yeah, absolutely, and anybody can go back and listen to the budget meetings from last year, and that's exactly what we talked about, that, you know, we wanted more officers. We knew that it was going to be hard to fill them. We didn't want to overtax the residents for positions that we didn't think that we could realistically fill. So we set a number that we thought that we could reach. Unfortunately, between then and now, you know, we've lost some officers to lateral transfers. They left our department for organized police departments. They've gone out injured. But just again, to reiterate what you just said, And I can speak as the union president and on behalf of the police department, because most of the people there, I've worked with their entire careers. The Southbury Police Department feels a huge and overwhelming support from the town of Southbury as a whole. We feel support from Heritage Village. We feel support from the town government, and again, I'm going to say this again, it's a great place to work, and we feel very supported by this town, and we're very grateful for that. And it's our goal to give back that support, and in the best way we can. And we would never make these decisions out of haste or out of something that wasn't beneficial for the town. The town is our utmost importance here. The people are important, and these decisions are made with the best interest of the town in mind.
Sergeant Guerrilla, when 2015, I believe we had only 17 officers in Southbury?
That's correct.
And during the past, my administration, we are budgeted for 24. How many new officers, if you probably know better than I, how many new officers have been hired during this administration?
Quick guess, I would say probably a dozen. I mean, we've
probably 12.
Yeah,
which is more than 50% of what's.
Yeah, we.
So, during this time, you're trying to fill the officers' positions, and you've looking, and we're still looking. I've never said no to hiring anybody. Is that correct?
No, the town's always respected, our wishes to fill the positions that were open.
And I actually have been anxious to fill them because we run into trouble with overtime, filling shifts. I know there were times where ordering people in was becoming an issue because it's bad for morale because they're getting called in so much that they're not able to spend time with their families. So it's been important to fill these positions. The question is, with what's happening in policing and the police accountability bills, it's making it difficult for us to fill these nationwide. And that's kind of what we're running into right now with doing that. I think we've covered, so my question is, and I've heard talk about this, you approached me a long time ago about this detective position, knowing the contract was coming up. And I honestly felt that you were talking to me about the best interest of the town of Southbury, the best interest of the police department. And I said to you, we can't get the CRO position filled. And what can we do? And it was actually your recommendation to do this, to enhance the position as a detective. And what I'm hearing is that by creating the detective position, it will enhance all the officers' ability to move these cases forward. What I'm getting at is when we have somebody on evenings or somebody on midnights, something happens and it's their investigation to start with, and they're assigned to the midnight shift or they're assigned to evening shift, and a lot of the investigation needs to be done during the day. What you and I talked about a little bit was that this would make it easier to do those cases, help the officer who's, I want to be clear, we don't want to take cases away from, I'm an advocate for our officers. This is part of what attracts our officers to Southbury, is they're allowed to do their cases alongside and see them through. I know that's been important to some of the officers we have, but this detective's position should enhance the ability of the patrol officers that are who are working to be more involved, and that the detective is able to suggest or assign, not assign because they won't be able to actually assign, but know the right direction for whatever problem there exists, like identity theft or whatever may come up. What I heard you say is there's different officers have different specific training, and that would be more efficient to cover any needs. even if it was in Heritage Village? Is that what you're saying?
That's true in any police department. There's officers that have different specialized training. Some officers are better in accident investigations, some are better in criminal investigations. And police management right now is very critical because we have to efficiently use the resources that we have. We're working with limited resources. Even if we had abundant resources, it's still good management to send your best guy to do the job, right? If you have somebody that's great at accident investigations, do you want to send them to go do something that they're not as good at if there's an accident? You want to send them, to do that. So it's a whole puzzle of putting the pieces together and knowing the people, knowing what they're good at. And then when you have somebody in the detective role that can mentor people that may not be good at, not that they're not good, but not as proficient in an area, and help them grow and make them better in an area and support them. It's just good management.
So the detective works alongside the patrol officer, and we do have relatively young, new hires who aren't as experienced as you and some of the others. That officer is then going to help get our less seasoned officers up to speed better by knowing and coaching or mentoring or helping them get through these cases. Is that true?
Absolutely, and there's a good possibility that one day that less seasoned officer will be the detective. There's more than enough work in the town of Southbury at the police department that the detective is not going to be able to take every single case that comes in. There's going to have to be support both ways. That patrol is going to have to work the case to a certain point, and then the detective can support patrol. It's not like the detective is going to take every major investigation, and patrol is just going to not have it. Any crimes to investigate. There's too much work for that. It's a symbiotic relationship that supports each other, and that's in any police department, not just ours.
So as chief of police, the technical term for me in state statute, I have to sign certain documents as chief of police, and I'm responsible for that. But I just want to say for the public that I greatly rely on the experience of our senior officers and our sergeants and our resident trooper to give good information to the board and to myself on making these decisions. I frankly don't. If I didn't have your counsel on positions like this, I don't think that would be good. And of course, I just want to say for the record, I think we've had a pretty good relationship with our police and the support that you've been given through the years here. Is there any other questions of Sergeant Grillo? Holly's trying to get on.
Okay, so I just want to make sure one point is absolutely clarified for folks who had concerns when stood at the microphone today. Heritage Village still has patrol officer regardless of the CRO, correct?
There's one there right now, absolutely.
Okay. And by taking this position and adding more robust features to it that includes things like financial scams and things like that, somebody is specialized in that area but is a designated liaison to still have a relationship with folks who want to speak to the same officer when they have a concern. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
John?
And this might just get back to, again, just brainstorming, thinking about how to, fill a position. I work for a major corporate U.S. company, and, they don't just say, well, I can't fill that position, I'm just going to make do. And then so I'm just going to hold this chart up again here just to remind us, when 23% of the population show up and ask for a community resource officer, and then to add on to that, because I've been getting some letters and some commentary and stuff, and one of the things I heard, and I think we heard a little bit about it tonight, was, we pay our taxes and we don't have, special needs or special, you shouldn't be special requirements. But somebody challenged me today and said, I pay more taxes than you. So I looked it up. And I live in a little 1,000-square-foot condo that's assessed at $86,000. And when you divide that out, it's $82,000. So when you divide it out, it's $82 per square foot. And the person who challenged me, who lives in Traditions, complained that he pays $10,000 in taxes. His square footage, 3,700 or whatever, divided by his assessed value is $86. He pays $4 more a square foot. Then I looked at, I'm going to get to the, so I looked at some other, I'm just laying a little foundation. So I looked at then a whole bunch of, just a couple others, and I see that there's people in this room and people on this board that are paying like $66 a square foot. Anybody that lives in a Berkshire, you're paying $104 a square foot. Okay, so big numbers, paying a lot of tax. If somebody came to you and said they are 23% of your population and they pay probably more than that in taxes and just asked you to fill that position, would there be a will or a way to get that done?
Well, I can answer it from a union standpoint. Contractually, there's no zero position. So the position would have to be recreated to fill it.
Okay, so direct through the management rights part of the contract.
There would have to be a position created, right, to fill it.
Gotcha. But if management rights created a negotiation between the union and the town and came up with that position, given willpower, there's an open position on the police department, and if we were targeted looking for that person, we probably could find them.
If we had the manpower to support a position, and we had the position to fill, is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
if we had a position and we had manpower to fill it, I mean, like that goes.
Right. So where there's a will, there's a way. If you were asked to do it, could we actually accomplish it if we figured out a way to make it happen?
I mean, we've always had a great relationship with the town, and we always work with the town on anything. We're any good recommendation or anything that the board has for the police department on, there's a lot of experience, up there. If anybody has any experience on recruitment or retention for the police department, we're definitely willing to hear it. We're
great. Appreciate that. Thank you.
So I don't think, the taxes, is an appropriate measure of our service to the community. Whether you pay $12,000 a year in taxes or you pay $1,400 a year, I actually do know there's some people who only pay about $1,400 in personal property, in property tax. Every citizen is treated equally based on needs. So I think that's what part of the idea of going to the detective position is to enhance all police protection and service to the town of Southbury. It's an enhancement to the service. I heard earlier that there reduction of service. Would you consider this a reduction in service? As a police detective's position? Excuse me. Of police services to the town, or an enhancement?
No, there's no reduction.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions from the board? Sergeant Grillo? I thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you. So based on the information we have here about the detectives and the detective positions and the contractual obligations, can I have the resolution of the job description brought up? Is that possible? Okay. So we have a contractual obligation that we need to approve. You have the job description in your packet. I'll entertain a motion. Resolve that the Southbury Board of Selectmen hereby approves the attached job description for detective. Can I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion?
Jeff, I'd like to propose an amendment that says that the detective, will be stationed in Heritage Village 3 days a week, 5 hours a day.
I'll second that motion. Is that a motion?
Motion is made and seconded. In the discussion, I think from hearing from Sergeant Grillo on this, and what he said, that how fluid the job is in the police and what they need to do, I think it would be restrictive or difficult to have that happen. That they would, because one of the things they're going to need to do as a detective is they will be needing a desk and assignment where they can answer the phones, do research, and need to be at times in the police department depending on what needs to be done. Holly?
Yeah, I think that was one of my questions, and I'm happy, I made the second so we can go to discussion. But what can be done? And I think this is probably a conversation for the police department about what is feasible. Is it feasible that the work can be done there? Is it feasible to perhaps add something to the job description that clarifies that that detective will work with senior services on issues like preventing financial scams and things like that? So I guess my next question is, how much leeway do we have to make any amendments to this job description as it's presented tonight?
I'm not so sure we can, we have a motion on the floor for the amendment. We had an officer, Sergeant Grillo, here to answer questions. And I think that the appropriate time to have asked that question was so Sergeant Grillo could discuss that with us and how difficult that might be. And I don't think at this time we're really we should have been talking about that earlier. And I don't think it's appropriate to bring Sergeant Grillo back up here now that we have a motion on the floor. It's a discussion amongst the Board of Selectmen. I think we need to not accept that amendment, vote on the description and get the person in place. We can have future discussions with the sergeant and as the detective gets on board and what the needs are and fulfill those needs as we find what those are, rather than just having an officer saying you have to go sit there for 3 days a week. So I don't think it's appropriate to, the question should have been asked what it would mean from a police activity and what could be done. So,
and this discussion is more towards, so the representation of the police, and you are chief of police, and who should be, kind of removing themselves from the conversation or representing themselves as the chief of police to say what that detective could do in the village and participate in the conversation in that effect. So you're the chief of police. Okay, so the detective works for you. You're kind of advising them what to do and working with them. And so on one side, I'm a little conflicted that you're part of the conversation of their workload while you're also their boss. But on the flip side, then, if that is the case, then you could help fill in those blanks that Officer Grillo isn't here to fill in right now.
I think Jeff has a response, but I'd just like to comment on that one thing you just mentioned about a conflict. The first selectman of any municipality is the chief executive officer of that municipality. He is the head of all of the town employees, all of the department heads, and is actively involved in drafting job descriptions for everybody. So you would have to conflict the manager of the town out of all employment decisions, the entire municipality. So I would disagree with, I would take issue with that characterization of there being some conflict of being involved in the discussion.
And I agree, I hear what you're saying, and I follow that mindset with the same thought, going a little bit further to what Jeff said a little earlier, is that he wasn't involved in the police negotiations because Dan and other people in HR and the police and unions were involved. But as the CEO of the company, of the town, it was his responsibility. He is the one who is directing that work and part of that negotiation.
So John, to answer your statement or question, I recuse myself from the actual contract negotiations because my brother is a police officer, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to negotiate contracts. So I leave it up to our CFO, who is very capable, our HR, and when the contract's brought to us as a board to consider, I do have a vote and I do look at it. I am the CEO of the town. I am by state legislation named as chief of police. I'm not sure you quite understand what that means as far as how it operates. But every CEO listens to the experts that are running your department. And if there is a problem where people come to me and say, geez, I called the police department and they didn't respond. They didn't send an officer. Not that I've had that situation. It is then my job to investigate, look into, discuss it with the department head, whether that's the resident trooper who's responsible. I've also been known to discuss issues with the lieutenant of the barracks because, and that's they run the day-to-day. I don't get involved on what the patrol should be, how they should be doing, because I am not a police officer. So I listen to the resident trooper. I listen to people who are involved in policing. Sergeant Grillo has been almost 20 years and frankly has treated this town as if it was his hometown. I think sometimes these officers, even if they don't live in town, actually feel more at home in Southbury than they do in their own communities because of the welcoming that they receive from our community. So do I oversee the police department? Yes, I do. As I oversee, I actually oversee the finance department. But when it comes to finances, I have a CFO who's very qualified, and I listen to his counsel and what he's discussing. I will give you an example right there is moving ahead with Oracle Financials. I am not a financial person, but I have somebody who knows what they're talking about. And with Officer Grillo and Sergeant Grillo and with Sergeant Rapp and their years of experience in this field and studying what they do, what's the most effective way that we can service the town of Southbury and the Heritage Village area. And they made the convincing argument or discussion why this should be done. And we did know that this is, I mean, all the board did know this was going to be done. So I will call the vote on the amendment. If you are for the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay? Nay. And that motion does not carry. I will call the vote on the resolution to accept the job description.
Can we have further discussion?
Oh, you want, okay, sure.
So on the job description itself, first off, I'd like to just thank everyone who came here tonight and voiced your concerns. I know it may not sound like people are hearing you, but people are hearing you. Sorry. It's, you know, this is all very important to us and something we've been involved in, and it's a So again, thank you all for coming and sharing your comments on something you feel passionately about, and you were certainly heard here tonight. I also thank Sergeant Grillo for coming here. I think that as these discussions have gone on over the last month or so, and on social media and newspaper articles and elsewhere, there's been a lot of mischaracterizations and misunderstandings, and I hope some of it was cleared up tonight from at least the department's perspective. My thoughts on this are twofold. One, so I'm just going to hold off and wait and hopefully be able to just conclude some comments on the topic, and I'm happy to hang out here and talk to anyone who wants to have a discussion after this meeting. You know, we're all always available. They're sort of twofold. One is there's a contractual issue. We have a contractual responsibility. We have an opinion from our labor attorney. This is in a collective bargaining agreement. We are required to have this position. It was negotiated between the town and the police union, and we need to move forward with that this evening. On the other hand, there's the services question and what type of services are being provided to the town, what type of services are being provided to the village, and all seniors, not just the village and the entire community, which I think is very important. And it's our responsibility to ensure the public safety, health, and welfare of all residents of the community. And it's something that we have all strongly spoken about and advocated for and worked on and budgeted and done what we can in that regard. And it's something that we will continue to do going forward. So as we do that, I think that we as a municipality and as a body need to collect all of the comments and concerns, and we need to, number one, we need to, like I said, when Sergeant Grillo was here, we need to sort of see this position, we need to evaluate this position. We can talk to the police department, to Selectman Betty's point about what kind of presence, physical presence can be in the village or not. We heard from Sergeant Grillo about how these people get pulled elsewhere, so it's hard to say you must be here for these hours and things like that, which is why you know, I felt the need to vote no on that amendment. But I think we should, one, have those discussions. Two, we should be evaluating this role and seeing what this liaison is doing, what kind of services he or she is providing, and how it's working for the municipality, and how it's working for our seniors, and how it's working for the village. Right now, we're all sort of in a vacuum. The position has just been created, and it's filling a role that's been vacant for 2 years. So we need to evaluate it, we need to watch it, we need to keep a tight leash on it, we need to go back and look at it in 3 months and 6 months and see what's going on. That's on the position. On the actual, some concerns about services and the types of things that need to be done, and what kind of presence there can be in the community, I think we need to talk to our police department. Sergeant Grillo talked about it a little bit tonight, a little bit was in the presentation about presentations they do at, you know, senior facilities, at the village, at the senior center, at the library, and maybe we get on a regular schedule, maybe we do more of that, I don't know, but we look at those sorts of things. We talk to our senior services director, and we see what can be done that way. We need to understand, evaluate, meet with folks in the village, meet with our seniors, and I agree with you. You're holding up the community policing sign. That's something we've been talking about in the town of Southbury since I've been on this board. We completely agree with that. So I think we need to have these discussions and make sure we're providing the services to the community that the community needs. And we need to go through the process of doing that. So on the detective position, I think we need to pass this tonight. I'll be voting yes on this. Think we need to watch it. We need to understand it. We need to see the services being provided. And then in another bucket, we need to have an ongoing and continuous discussion about senior services and other public safety concerns and what needs to be done to meet those concerns and to evaluate them in that regard. And the last thing I'll mention, I mentioned it when the sergeant was up, and that deals with budgeting. And I just want everyone to be assured that public safety is important to this body. We did increase our police budget this year. We increase our police budget almost every year, but we increased it this year by adding man count. I hope that we can fill those positions and increase it again next year by adding even more people. And we add more people, that allows us to provide more resources, allows us to deal with a lot of these situations. So I thank you all for being here. I thank you for your comments here tonight. And that's it.
Okay. You want more discussion?
So, from the person who voted no for the budget, if I recall my thoughts, is that I asked to have an additional officer added to the budget, and that was, sent away, and we didn't do that. But that's what I was asking for. At this point, quite honestly, you recuse yourself from the contract negotiations. I'm thinking that we should do the same here and possibly send this back to Dan Colton for review and comments. So my thought is, right out of the gate, I'd like to make an amendment to this because, and I say this because when we sat in our meeting to review the contract negotiations for the police contract, we looked at, there was a detective position, and we were told that that detective position would include the community resource officer. We were not given a job description. We were not shown what it was about. So the way it was presented to us, as far as I'm concerned, is that the two positions were going to be merged, and they were going to be one and the same, and that the detective position would then be, because of the title, would be a more, people would flock to do that work. So my, I guess to revise this, or the proper term would be to an amendment. My amendment would be to take the detective position and the community resource officer position that was approved, and I'm still kind of lost about when it became unapproved, but take those two and merge them together. Put it all together in one big package, and then we work on it over the time, as Jason is suggesting, to see how it works out, to go through the growing pains. Yep. So that's my comment, and the motion would be, or to make an amendment to merge these two documents together, so that when it's read through, is that the detective position and the community resource officer are of equal workload.
I'll second that for discussion.
Seconded for discussion. Go ahead.
Yeah, if we could take the 2 lines out of the current job description. Do you want to put it up there? Or can we? And replace that with the 2019 document that says what the community resource officer does. That would certainly, I think, go a long way to making us folks happy. So if you go up further,
On page 2, second paragraph.
yeah, so just above dress code, there's a small paragraph there, about 3 lines.
What do you want to do?
I'm seconding John's idea that we replace those 3 lines with more or less the totality of the CRO description from 2019.
Any further discussion?
I just want to mention, we have a legal opinion from our Labor Council, and I think that it would not allow that. It says we can't reinstitute the CRO position. It's not in the contract. That's why I sort of tried to lay out a process inarticulately as I'm listening to everything as to how we can move forward and make sure we're providing the appropriate services to our community.
So let's borrow the language about what the duties are without the title.
I think you're doing the same thing.
Can't they go back and negotiate?
So right now, we have a legal opinion by our labor attorney. Changing the description to mirror a CRO, whether you title it or not, in my belief, that would go to a grievance and continue on, and they would probably win without having a legal opinion from our labor attorney. You could change the title. It's going to be based on the substance of the job description, not just the title. So even if you wanted to do that, you're essentially here, and especially on public record, saying that you're going to change it back to a CRO position, and it's not in the contract. So whether you're doing, I don't believe you're going to be, you're going to have a legal problem with that. It will be grieved, I'm sure. And with the change in the language, and then what's going to happen is nothing will be filled.
But correct me that this job description is not part of the contract, right?
The job description's not, but if the CRO's position is no longer in the contract, what you're talking about is not close to what a detective is assigned to do. And it's going to become a labor issue. I think you can see that. I believe it's going to become a labor issue because the language of the CRO has been inserted back in, and they're going to say you're just changing the title but keeping it as a CRO. And again, Sergeant Grillo discussed the issue with filling this position, and if you have to end up assigning it to a junior officer, and retention. I think we heard all that from our sergeant about the trouble of retaining our officers. It's not as simplistic as just saying, let's do that. And now we will assign someone to this position. And if it's that description, we're going to have trouble filling that position because, one, it will be grieved, I can assure you. Two, if you assign it to a junior officer, again, as Sergeant Grillo said, there's a good chance they're going to say, I need to go to another department. And what you're going to do by doing that, assigning it to a junior officer, you are not going to have a seasoned person who could fulfill the detective's position. You're going to assign it to someone who may only been here for a year or two, and truly has
Jeff, contractual, based on this, the people have to have 5 years, they have to have 5, based on this description. So it's not going to be a one-year person.
But if right, but they can refuse to take it by the contract.
Sure.
It will go to the junior officer. If it doesn't have 5 years, if they don't have 5 years experience, they can't take it. If the senior officer says, send it to the next one, they're not going to, you're going to have to, it's going to be pushed down.
Do we know how many people have applied for it?
For this, we do have 2 people who I understand that we're interested in it. You change the job description, and the chances are you will not have 2 people. So you see the problem with doing that?
The problem is we did this whole thing backwards. this should have been done before we ratified the contract. That's the learning thing that we did. That's what we've learned tonight.
Well, so, any other comment on the amendment? I'll call the vote.
Aye.
Okay, nay? Nay. Okay. I will call the vote on the resolution. All in favor of the resolution? I will call the vote. All in favor of the resolution, please say. You want more discussion? The amendment didn't pass. Do you have another amendment?
Yeah.
You want to make another amendment?
So quite honestly, I would like to table this conversation, and I'll tell you why, because I'm reading through this contract and I really feel hosed, because when I was sitting with you guys in that executive session, I was shown a contract that I was not able to take with me. And I got to tell you that I would have never agreed to a detective position that didn't somewhere have in the word here something about Heritage Village. So when we were there was a word about that the village would be involved in this. There was going to be a job description that was presented, and then that contract on that night was taken away. And now the job description is totally different than what we talked about. And I think that we should table this. We should send it back to Dan to take a look at. I mean, he is HR. He can take a look through this and come back and give us his advice as the person who you originally abstained from doing this work, and let him do this work. So I'm motioning to table this.
Just for the record, John, you did second the resolution to approve the contract. Is there, you want to amend the motion? Are you amending the motion? We have a motion on the table, and I don't think we can do that.
Can we just clarify with a question? Has Dan,
What's that, Jason?
Selectman Deal wants Dan to look at it. Can you clarify, has Dan looked at it?
Dan Colton has looked at the job description along with HR and working with the PD. Yes. I have not been, that was not indicated to me that he wanted to. I'm going to call the vote on this. All in favor of the job description of the job of the detective, signify by saying aye. Aye.
I'm sorry, can you clarify? Wait, I'm sorry. Was there a motion? I'm sorry, was there a motion on the floor?
There was a motion on the floor, made and seconded, resolved that the Southbury Board of Selectmen hereby approve the attached job description for detective. It is on the floor.
So this vote is for the actual approval of the job description, not John's.
Right, this job description that you have in your packet. Okay, I have not heard a second on that.
Well, it would have to be postponing. So if you're making a motion to postpone, I can second that. Tabling means you address it in the same meeting. Postponing is...
Do you want to make the motion?
I'll make a motion to postpone the vote on the police detective's job description.
John seconding it? Any discussion on that?
Yes. Do we have a contractual issue if we postponed? I'm sorry, if we're to postpone, do we have any, does that cause us any liability with the contract if it wasn't voted on within a certain time period?
I honestly don't know that. I don't think so. But we can't let this sit out there without filling the position.
And that's not my intent. My intent is to make sure that when we vote this time, we get it right. Because clearly, when you have this kind of public outpouring, we didn't get it right last time. And the only reason I'm postponing it is because, I'm happy that we have a detective. I've voted consistently to add police officers to our force. But we've had this outpouring, we've had the letters, we've had the phone calls in my case. But we haven't made any change at all to those 3 sentences, and I just think that's not the way to move forward.
So again, I'm going to get back to the, what is not in the contract is a CRO position, and adding language to a job description that mirrors a CRO position, even though the name is changed. I can get an opinion by our labor attorney whether he feels that is, it can be done or not. We have an opinion here about filling the detective position, and the job description is specific to a detective and the duties of a detective. Again, I said this before, if you are going to replace language that reflects what was a CRO position, I believe, one, you're going to get difficulty filling it.
I heard you. I don't want you to have to repeat yourself, Jeff, but perhaps there's some intermediate language that would expand the responsibilities of the detective to focus on Heritage Village.
Which, in this job description, is the point of contact and liaison to Heritage Village is in there.
But simply to forward it along.
I'm sorry? I'm sorry? I'm sorry?
But it's simply to forward it along. I mean, that's the word, forward it.
We have officers in the village, patrolling the village and available in our community, including the village, 24 hours a day. Oh, we have feedback. So we have a motion to table the job description?
If I could just
Postpone.
Or postpone?
I did want to just fill in one little blank.
We are meeting next Thursday, or not next Thursday, but the one after, right?
Yeah, I'm just, so I just want to make sure I didn't misquote anybody. I don't think Dan said that he wanted to get back involved, or he just thought that that if we took a little more time to talk about it, that he thought that there could be different solutions. I'm just saying that we should back up from doing this right now. We should postpone it for a little bit so that we can get the same people in the room that talked about the contract. Those same people can work on this also, and we can come with a smart, well thought out, well planned presentation. I'll just bring up one last thought of why I want to also postpone this, is because again, you delivered a presentation with 3 letters from other officers and state police 1 hour before this meeting. It was not enough time to review this work.
Okay, so I think what, if the motion is to amend the motion to table to postpone to the next meeting, I think one of the things we need to do, and Sergeant Grillo is not here, as I said earlier, I think the time to have asked him these questions was when he was here in front of us, and his take on what it would mean on the police side. So I think we would need to discuss this operationally with the police department, what these changes would mean, and I would have to get input from them about, and from the labor attorney about changing that much of the description that it mirrors the CRO position and what that would mean from a labor standpoint, and could it be grieved, and do we think it would be, if it was grieved, would we prevail in the grievance? Any other discussion on the amendment of the motion? Motion, well, do we have to? Yeah, but we had a motion on the floor. We had a motion to approve on the floor. So is it an amendment to the motion or the?
It's just a motion.
Okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure we get, procedurally, I just want to make sure we do the right thing. That's what the question is. Okay, so I would suggest that that's what we want to do is have a conversation with the sergeants and the labor attorney on that, and postpone this to the regular Board of Selectmen's meeting. We can do that, but we can do that.
I would just ask our friends from Heritage Village to count your numbers if you're coming down, and please keep it under 120 so we can have our meeting.
Otherwise, we have to post.
I think the motion to postpone to be to the next meeting, not to the next regular meeting, and the reason for that is we don't have an answer to the question of whether there's a time urgency here, and if there is, and this needs to be done next week, then we need to meet next week. So you just want flexibility in the motion to schedule it whenever you need to do it.
Is that friendly, technically a friendly, not technically the next regular meeting, but we may have to meet sooner if there is?
Postpone to the next meeting.
Okay, next meeting. Okay. Well, they don't, so anyway, so we will take, the motion is to postpone to the next Board of Selectmen's meeting, and just have legal counsel weigh in on what that would mean, and discuss it. We'll talk with them.
Clarify the responsibilities of the detective to Heritage Village, basically.
Okay. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? And it carries. I think we can move on from item E on the Community Resource Officer. If that's okay with everybody, I think we're set. And do I have a motion to adjourn? Holly, second that motion?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? And we are adjourned.